I want to share with you a collection of all new ideas that I think would be very useful in terms of guiding and improving our lives. And the way you could handle this share is you could take or leave each idea. They're each contained units on their own, and they're relatively new thoughts, new ideas that are out there in the world that I think are very much paired with Torah ideas. The first idea I want to share with you is the following. There's a concept called interbeing. I heard about it where I went to lunch with a psychologist a little while back, and he said, "What do you think of the concept of interbeing?" I said, "I never heard of that. What was haste interbeing?" So he told me about a philosopher, a metaphysical philosopher by the name of Thich Nhat Hanh, who says the following. Listen to this quote. "Without a cloud, there could be no rain. Without rain, the trees cannot grow. Without trees, we can't make paper. The cloud, then, is essential for the paper to exist. If the cloud is not here, then the sheet of paper can't be here. So in a sense, we could say that the cloud and the paper are interbeing. They use each other. They're related to each other. Everything is connected." So this idea that he has of interbeing, I don't know the word that Chazal would use for it, but there is no doubt this is a concept buried very much intertwined with our tradition. Let me tell you how. Let me start with a story. The story is the story of the Baal HaTanya. The first Lubavitcher Rebbe, when he was on his deathbed, he was lying down on his bed looking up. And the Hasidim asked the Rebbe, "Rebbe, what do you see?" Expecting that as he was entering into the next world, he must be seeing something that's beyond. And the Rebbe turned to them and said, "Normally where I would have seen a beam above my head, I see the Hebrew letters Kuf Vav Reish Hey. Kuf Vav Reish Hey." Meaning, what does he mean he saw the Hebrew letters? He saw ultimately that the whole world was encoded and made up by Hebrew letters. That is interbeing. Interbeing means that all these Hebrew letters that we have around in a siddur, in a chumash, in a sefer Torah, they're already here next to you on a table. Because what keeps the table alive? The Hebrew letters. Shulchan, Shin, Lamed, Ches, Nun. I'll give you a totally different story that make this a little more sense. Again, we're talking about this concept of interbeing, how everything in our lives is related, and nothing is disconnected. It was known that Rav Levi Yitzchak Barditchev would get very wild and excited with his Judaism. I mean, he would get out of control. And he wanted to go to the house of the great tzaddik Rav Baruch of Mezhebaz, but the problem is Rav Baruch of Mezhebaz had a very clean, calm house. Shabbos was beautiful, Shabbos was calm, Shabbos was organized. So finally, Rav Baruch of Mezhebaz relented and said, "You know what, I got to have the great tzaddik Rav Levi Yitzchak Barditchev at my house." So he said, "I'm going to have you over, a holy man like you, but I'm asking you, please don't make meshuggah in my house. Don't make it crazy on Shabbos in my house. Let's keep it nice." So Rav Levi Yitzchak Berditchev says, "I have an idea. I know how I'm going to stay calm. What I'm going to do is I'm not going to," he said, "don't ask me to pray anything. Don't ask me to say any tefillos, because the second I do, I go nuts. I start jumping. I start doing backflips. Just don't ask me to do it. I'll just say amen to whatever you say. Don't call on me to make kiddush. Don't ask for any of it." So the plan was a good one. Keep Rav Levi Yitzchak Berditchev away from anything that's too intensely holy, and he'll keep himself calm. So he comes over to the house for Shabbos dinner, and Rav Baruch Mezhebaz comes to the table, and he's wearing the most beautiful talis that he used to wear for his Shabbos table. Beautiful talis. The metal pieces on the talis are shining beautifully and radiantly. Rav Levi Yitzchak Berditchev is trying to control himself. He already sees this scene, and it's so intense for him. It's too much. He's very sensitive. So he decides to grab the edge of the table so he doesn't freak out and flip out. They start with the Kiddush, such a holy Kiddush. Rav Levi Yitzchak Berditchev is in his mind. He's doing flips and jumping jacks in his mind. He's going out of control. All of a sudden, they ask, "Do you want to make Kiddush?" He says, "Don't ask me to do anything. No Kiddush, fine." They start singing Shalom Aleichem, Eishes Chayil. He just nods. He says Amen. He's under total control. He's got this. He sits down at the table, and of course, there's a gabbai who's going to bring out the food. Now, by the Hasidim, they have two types of fish. They have sweet fish, and they have sour fish. There's a little bit of machlokus by the Hasidim what you're supposed to have first, the sweet fish or the sour fish. Which one do you have first? So the Gabbai comes over to Rav Levi Yitzchak Berditchev, who's already shaking under the table. He's already trembling and trying to hold it all together. And all of a sudden, the Gabbai turns to him and says, "Do you want sweet fish?" He can't keep quiet anymore. He's got to answer the question. He's forced to decide. He opens his mouth and says, "Sweet fish! I love sweet things. I love sweet Torah. I love sweet music." He loses it. He knocks the tray of gefilte fish in the air. He's jumping on the table. And all of a sudden he looks up and he sees the schmaltz from the fish is all over Rav Baruch of Mezheboz's talis. It's dripping right off the talis. He's in shock. Rav Baruch of Mezheboz says, "This is the holiest talis I've ever worn in my life right now. The schmaltz of the holy Rav Levi Yitzchak Berditchev." According to legend, the schmaltz talis of Rav Baruch of Mezheboz was passed down for generations until it ended with the Munkacher Rebbe at the war. Why am I telling you a story of a schmaltz talis? How's a schmaltz talis going to change your life? So I think that's a great example of interbeing. Why? The talis was worn by Rav Baruch of Mezheboz as a minhag of the Baal Shem Tov. The idea of bringing out the fish was another minhag rooted in deep Kabbalah of bringing out fish to the table. The idea of being ecstatic and joy and simchas Torah that came out of Rav Levi Yitzchak Berditchev, that went into that talis at that moment. The idea of passing on that talis to all the Rebbes, all of a sudden, everyone's tradition came shared into one. That's the idea of interbeing. Interbeing is that even one piece of paper is already connected to tons of generations. I'll say it like this even. The recording for this shir is interbeing. What does it mean? Because we're saying it over today and we're telling over this story, we today are connecting back to Rav Levi Yitzchak Berditchev and Rav Baruch of Mezheboz. The idea that he had a talis is connected back to the mitzvah in the Torah of making a talis and a tzitzis, and everything is related to each other. Now let me show you how this applies in our life in a little bit more practical way. Every time you don't cook on Shabbos, but you eat something cooked before Shabbos, the reason you don't cook it on Shabbos is because that's what they did to make the Mishkan. So that means when you're having a cholent, it's like you're standing in the Mishkan, like the Beis Hamikdash, because the prohibition to cook on Shabbos comes from the Mishkan. So therefore, even the most mundane things that we do, the smallest things that we do, are so connected to so many deep ideas. Now, where did the Mishkan come from? The Mishkan was built from wood poles. Where did the wood poles come from? Our Medrash tells us that they came from the poles that Avram planted of trees to provide shade for his guests. So now follow it back. When you have a bowl of cholent on Shabbos, you had it because you made it hot before Shabbos, which means you are sensitive to Kedusha Shabbos, which means you're thinking about the Mishkan. If you're thinking about the Mishkan, go back to the Mishkan. How was it built? It was built from the lumber of Avram Avinu. Why is that significant? Because that lumber was used to provide shade for the guests by Avram Avinu. You, with your cholent bowl in 2018, are now connected back to the Hachnasas Orchim of Avram Avinu thousands of years ago. And the cycle and the circle continues around and around. And that's the idea of interbeing. You are connected. We don't have a Beis Hamikdash nowadays. We have a shul. So the shul represents the Mikdash Me'at, the little Beis Hamikdash. Every time you walk into shul now, you go back to the Beis Hamikdash, which goes back to the Mishkan, which goes back to Avram Avinu, which goes back to his guests, and the cycle continues. It's an amazing idea of how everything is interconnected in this world, and the relationship between all these separate parts, nothing is detached from you. Now how this comes together, someone comes knocking on your door for tzedakah. Two ways to look at it. It's a schnorr at my door who wants money. Get him out of here. The other way, the Hachnasas Orchim that I can provide now connects me back to Avram Avinu. Avram Avinu put those wood back into the Mishkan. The Mishkan becomes the Mikdash. The Mikdash becomes the Shul. The Shul's connected to Shabbos. And all of a sudden, by the very act of taking care of one person for 3 minutes, you've now tapped into the energy of all of Judaism, all of Yiddishkeit, and you're back around to the talus with the schmaltz of Rav Levi Yitzchak Berditchev. I remember a movie. It's a 1971 Disney film called Bed Knobs and Broomsticks. One of my favorite Disney movies. And it's the story of Professor Emilius Brown, who's this professor. He's a phony magician, but he's a nice guy. And he likes this Mrs. Price, Angela Lansbury, because she's a good witch. And she has half of a book of a secret spell. The name of the spell was called Executionary Locomotion. It could make things that are not alive begin to walk. She needs to find the other half of the spell. And until she has the other half, hers is flawed and doesn't do anything. And I think that's a good way of looking at it as well. That until we begin to see the full picture, how everything connects, we're missing half the story. We're always missing half the story. Until we see how everything relates to each other, all the pieces unite, all the pieces connect. When you're keeping the Shabbos, you're connected back to Achnas Zorchim and Avram. And again, that cycle around and around. Judaism is meant to be experienced in the full picture. Any piece of it you're missing. I always say over my favorite Dvar Torah from the Baba Rebbe. The Baba Rebbe says, why do you break the matzah before you do the magid, before you tell the story? Right? We do yachatz and then we do magid. Why do you break the matzah before magid? Because what you're trying to say is that until you have the full story, until you hear someone else's story, you only have half the story. We only, through combination with each other, begin to build the entire legacy. I heard a beautiful pshat in what Lashon Hara is. What's Lashon Hara? You know what Lashon Hara is? Why is Lashon Hara such a big deal? Okay, so you spread some rumor about somebody. Lashon Hara is a big deal for the following reason. This comes out right. I saw Rav Tzvi Kluger write this. I love this pshat. Lashon Hara is you spoke bad about somebody else. Now think about it for a moment. How did you recognize that what somebody else did was bad? How did you know it was bad? Says Rav Tzvi Kluger, it's because you do the same thing. Otherwise, you wouldn't have caught it. You only pick up the junk in others because you yourself do that same thing. That's how you know it. That's how you could tell it a mile away. You yourself are someone who perpetuates that. And that's the flaw of Lashon Hara. It's hypocrisy. It's you talking negative. You saw what this person did? It bothers you because you do the same thing. You do the exact same thing. And therefore, that's the essence of Lashon Hara. We're all related. In the positive, in the negative, we are all related to every action and everything we do. Everything goes back to the beginning. Everything goes back to each other. So that's the first idea I want to share with you. By the way, that idea of Lashon Hara ties into, there's a secular book called The Four Agreements. It's one of the best. The Four Agreements by Miguel Ruiz. Miguel Ruiz says something only bothers you in somebody else because it's a wound that you already have open in you. And that's why it bothers you when they do it. I saw another book, I forgot who said this. When you see something you don't like, you have to stop and ask yourself, how am I that? Right? When there's something, a midah, a quality or a trait that somebody else is manifesting that drives you crazy, stop and ask yourself, how am I that? Because it's bothering you, because you see that person in you. There's something of that person that's there inside of you, and that's why it's bothering you. So that's our first idea. The idea is one of interbeing. Everything is connected. Everything is related. Every mitzvah you do is not just a particular mitzvah right now, but is connected to the whole gamut of Jewish history. Every behavior, every kindness. I mean, it's an amazing thought. The power of the thought that when you're giving someone $1, you're connecting back to Avram Avinu, thousands of years ago, and every chesed that's done since then is a very empowering Jewish idea. And Judaism believes, as we talked about in the third hour, in the collapsing of time, how it's not just something that we commemorate that happened back then, but bayamim hahem bazman hazeh, what happens back then is actually authentically happening right now. Second idea I want to share with you. So again, the function of this shir is to look at contemporary concepts that are coming out now and show you these are really Torah concepts that have always been there. They're just being packaged now in a different way. There's a TED Talk by a guy named Simon Sinek. Okay, Simon Sinek is a great influencer right now. He has a book called Start with the Why. Start with the Why. So what is that about? What is this why idea all about? So let me share this with you. There's a very strange variation of chess called blindfold chess. You don't really put on a blindfold, but you play without looking at the board. Only a few people could do it because you have to keep the whole board in your head. Some of the highest ranking chess players have been able to do 20 boards or so at the same time without looking. 1947, to the astonishment of everybody who heard about this, this guy, Miguel Najdorf, Najdorf, Miguel Najdorf, plays 45 opponents at once while he's blind. 39 of those matches he won. He lost 2 and he tied 4 times. It took him 29 hours. It's a record that nobody's even come close to at all, what he did. Now, why did he do this stunt? So I looked into why he did this stunt, and listen to this, okay? It's a guy in Brazil. His name is Argentina. His name is Miguel Najdorf. His real name is Mendel Najdorfson. He's a Jew in Poland. 1939, he's invited to play in a chess tournament in Argentina. He goes, and a week later, the Nazis invade Poland. He never can go back, and he never hears from his family again. He has no idea what became of them. There weren't the kind of documentation and searches that we can do today back then. He tries to get information about his family, nothing. So how is he going to get word to them that he's alive? See what I'm going to do? I'm going to put myself in the news. So he trains to play blind chess, to do the most incredible stunt that anybody in that world did. And he said what drove him was the love and memory of his family, so that if somebody was still alive, they would find him again. And members of his family did find him. It's an unbelievable thing. What drove him to do this was why he was doing it. The why. So Simon Sinek's idea is that in the secular realm is that it all starts with the why. That motivates everything that we do. He said, for example, look at Apple's mission statement. Apple starts with the why, right? Their mission statement is, why? Because we make great computers. And then it goes into the how. They're user-friendly, beautiful design, easy to use. And then there's the what. Want to buy one? That's the Apple mission statement. So what did Apple do? It started with the why. You want to affect people, you start with the why. Okay, that's Simon Sinek's idea. Once you take this idea, it's so beautiful how it comes out in the Torah itself. Asu li mikdash v'shachanti b'socham. Make for me a mikdash and I will dwell b'socham. You know what the word b'socham in Hebrew means? Not in it. It means I'll dwell in you. Wait a second. So why am I building the Mishkan? It should be, and build for me a Mishkan, and I'll dwell in it, not in you. But rather it's telling you the primary purpose is the why. Why am I asking you to construct a building? Just so you could think about me and be connected to me. It's what we talked about in the last year, about why did God want our animal offerings? Why the animal offerings? For what purpose? God doesn't want them. He wants a mechanism by which we can connect to Him and think about Him. It's just about the why. What is the purpose? Getting focused to. Too often Jews lose the forest for the trees for the forest. Which one? Whatever way we lose it. We lose the forest for the trees because we forget about the why we're doing something. And we frustrate people. I mean, especially children. Children are frustrated by our halachos and our minhagim and our practices that we keep when we never bother to explain the why. When it's being done just because. Millennials and down don't care about the actions if it's not going to make a difference. And therefore, the why is the explanations that make a difference. Anybody who's been counting the Omer knows that before the Omer and the Siddur, there's a L'Shem Yichud. There's a L'Shem Yichud. I always wondered. L'Shem Yichud, it's a prayer that allows you to collect your kavanah, to get your intentions together before you do the mitzvah. It's the only mitzvah that every Siddur, no matter if you're a chassid or not a chassid, you're constantly focused on the L'Shem Yichud. The intentions. Meaning, many times Hasidim, they do that intention prayer before every mitzvah. But there's something about Sfiras HaOmer that all of a sudden most people do the intentions before. And the question is why? And I thought the following reason. The Omer is leading up to a count that goes to Shavuos when we receive the Torah. And the institution of saying this prayer is there to remind you that the purpose of receiving the Torah is about the kavanah, the why, your intention. God is not just giving you a book filled with actions that you have to do and cross a checklist. It's more than that. It's about connecting to God on a higher level and understanding, why am I doing what I'm doing? So Sfiras HaOmer sets the tone for the entire Torah. Every mitzvah you have to ask yourself, why am I doing what I am doing? What is the purpose behind it? You won't always have the reason, but at the end of the day, there's a baseline reason, and that is somehow this mitzvah enables me to connect to God. Okay, so that's the idea of starting with the why. Next, third idea. Okay, this idea I want to share with you is the following. I call it movie making. Okay? What does it mean, movie making? So, modern psychologists say that a large cause of our unhappiness is mental movies. What are mental movies? Mental movies are a misuse of our imagination. You have a painful experience with someone, so then what you do is you run that movie over and over and over in our mind. You visualize what that person said, what they did, how that felt at the time, and you keep replaying the movie over and over. So where does that play out in our tradition? The Ishbitzer Rebbe, who we learned about in the third shir, the Ishbitzer Rebbe says that the koach hadimyon, the koach of imagination, right? Dimyon, scrambled, spells midyan. It's a very negative energy, meaning we always assume creativity and imagination is great. And it is great. You need imagination. You need creativity. But it's a double-edged sword that sometimes people use their imagination and their creativity to hurt, to cause pain, right? And the way you do that is you do it to yourself. You tell yourself a story over and over and over. The Saba of Kelm, the Alter of Kelm. The Alter of Kelm was one of the great Musar teachers in Jewish history, one of the greatest. He said the essence of Judaism boils down to the sod of Tzior. What's Tzior? Tzadi Yud Vav Resh. It means the secret of the imagery. The image that you portray in front of you is what affects your entire life. If I put an image in front of me at my best, it's going to inspire me to be better. If I put an image in front of me suffering, of me a failure, of me negative, then that's what I'll get. That's the output I'll get. The image I portray in front of me, the goal that I put in front of me, how I visualize everything. If I see that person always as a negative person, that's what I'm going to get from them. That's not the power of positive thinking. That's not intentions draw positive energy. That's not what that means at all. It means you relate to the image that you create. See, somebody can hurt you, and you can choose to create an image of them as a terrible person. Or you could choose to create an image of them as a person who's hurting themselves. It's all in the image that you create. I guess the difference would be this. You're in an elevator, and all of a sudden you feel someone attacking you, hitting you. You turn around to just hit him across the face, and all of a sudden you see it was a blind person with a walking stick. The anger is gone in a second. Why is the anger gone in a second? Because all of a sudden you see their intention was never to hurt you. They didn't know where they were. There's no anger there. Anger can't be there. So it's all in the projection of how we want to see the scenario. And that is within our choice. That is our capability to do. That is what we are able to do. The thinker, New Agey thinker, Eckhart Tolle says a great line. He says, the primary cause of unhappiness is never the situation, but rather your thoughts about the situation. It's unbelievable. The primary cause of unhappiness is never the situation, but rather they are your thoughts about that scenario or of the situation itself. I saw a fascinating interpretation of Avraham's Bris Ben Abasarim. Right? Avram has this vision of God where God shows him these two paths and it splits and he's told all about Egypt and everything. So the Akedas Yitzchak says it's a very dark dream. It's a very, very dark dream. The Bris Ben Abasarim was just a collection of all of Avram's greatest fears. God wanted Avram to look at an image of all his greatest fears so he could just get rid of him. Get rid of them. Get them out of yourself. Here are all your greatest fears. They're going to become slaves. This is going to happen to them. This is going to happen to your children, and nothing will come of them. God says, now I want to clean that image. How does the dream end? He tells him one day they're going to come out of Egypt, and they're going to be the most successful people in the world. He was telling Avram, bring out your fears, bring out your dream. Now I'm going to clean it for you. I'm going to show you how to have a great dream. I'm going to show you how to have a great vision, because that's what Judaism needs. Judaism needs people who are going to have positive and amazing dreams. It's called reframing. It's perfect for our children as well. Our children at times can get into this habit where they want to see how everything is going to be a failure. I'm going to mess up. I'm going to be embarrassed in front of the class. I'm going to go through that. Our job as parents is to help them reframe their dreams, reframe their image. Let them see a version of the story that comes out much better, and hold on to that image. Hold on to that image in the story. Spoiler alert in the new Avengers. Spoiler alert. Tune off now if you don't want to hear this for a minute. The whole yesod of how it ends is that Doctor Strange projects in his mind a version of the story where they win. He says, I went through 1.4 million versions of the story, and we lose and all die in every single version except for one. And we realize by the end that he held on to the one version by which they come out on top. And that's what you got to hold on to. It may be all the versions of the story may come out negative, may come out in a dark way, but our job is to present to our children the story, the movie that is going to work out. The movie and the story that is going to work out. I saw in a book, What You Think of Me is, a book is called, and it's the title. Title is amazing. After that, the book meant nothing to me. Okay, the title is called, What You Think of Me is None of My Business. Oh, is that amazing? You hear that? What you think of me is none of my business. It's an amazing. Imagine living with that kind of attitude, in our lives. It's incredible. So let's go on to the next day. So what have we learned so far? So we learned so far, number one, the idea of interbeing. How empowering it is when we realize every one of our mices, every one of our actions, our behaviors, everything is interrelated. It elevates the power of everything we do. Number two, Simon Sinek's idea of starting with the why, of beginning to ask ourselves, what's the purpose behind this? What was the reason behind this? Number three, after that, we saw the idea of the movies we keep making in our mind, that we play over and over. Switch them out for more empowering movies. Use your imagination for something so much better and something that's more enriching in our lives. Now I want to share with you the fourth idea. Idea number 4. What is pain? What is pain? The Mishnah in Pirkei Avos says, Hamakir es makomo. Right? That one has to recognize their place. What does it mean, recognizing? How do you recognize your place? How do you not recognize your place? What are these differences? So let's think about what pain is and what that feeling is of anxiety. Imagine you're stuck in traffic and your kids have a performance. They have their end of the year school play and you're in traffic. Pain is your brain telling you a version of you there, and then the other half of your brain has the version that's happening now where you're not there. And the clash between the two is creating this unresolved anxiety that is almost unable to be handled. Ezehu Ashir, who is wealthy, Hasomeach bechelko, one who is happy with their chelek. You know what that means? If you realize when you're in traffic an hour away, there is no other reality of me there. This is where I am right now. Right here, in this spot, on the 101 freeway, in traffic, this is where I am. There's no other version of the story. This is where I am right now. When one accepts the present situation as is, instead of the other variation of the story that's unattainable right now, the tension goes away. That's Hamakir es Makomo. You know, the famous pshat of the Ibn Ezra on Lo Sachmod, not to covet. Famous pshat of Lo Sachmod. Why should you not covet? Because it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. It's like me coveting Richard Branson's lifestyle. It's not in my range. Whatever he's doing, it's not in my range. So I would never be jealous. So what's jealousy? It's projecting what someone else has as being in your range. I should have that. Who determined that that should be in your range? You have a box right now. This is where you are. Accept where you are in the moment, and therefore you'll never be jealous. I want that person's house. I want that the person has. I want that the person's success. That's not what is meant for you right now. What I would change the name of the book. Not what someone else thinks of me is none of my business. What another person has is none of my business. What I have is what I'm supposed to have right now. Where I am is where I'm supposed to be right now. And the source of the pain is when your brain is telling you that you're supposed to have different from what you have, or you're supposed to be where you isn't. Right? It's not the case. Where you are is where you should be. The fifth idea. Fifth idea. So as a child, someone knocks over your blocks. You made a little thing, they knocked over your blocks, you're freaking out. 4-year-old range. At 8 years old, someone destroyed your baseball card or your 19 Tanakh cards or your Pokemon card. Someone bent the corner, you're freaking out. Now imagine someone knocked over your Jenga. You did at a bar mitzvah, they have a giant Jenga set you could do now, a lot of the bar mitzvahs. So you're doing the Jenga thing, and you're now 25 years old, and someone accidentally knocks down the Jenga set. It doesn't really bother you. I doubt almost anybody would really care less that it got knocked over. What does that show you? Very simple idea that problems fall away once you're at higher altitudes. Once you're at higher altitudes, the problems go away. Right? You've elevated yourself to a higher level of maturity that those issues you had before are no longer issues. In there is the solution to almost any problem. If you raise yourself to a higher altitude, that which bothered you before will no longer bother you. The problems go away at a higher altitude. So how does that relate to us? HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells Yeshua over and over again, I am with you. Right? He says to Moshe and to Aaron, I am with you. I'm going to be chazek ve'amatz, be courageous and strong. Ki ani emcha. I will be with you. I will stand by you. What does that mean, I'm going to be with you? You would think that would mean that therefore he's never going to mess up. But that's not the case. They all mess up. Everybody messes up at least once. King David is the king of the mess up. So then what was the point of I am with you? The point of I am with you does not mean that you're not going to fail. The point of I am with you does not mean you're not going to mess up. What it means is since you and I are together, you're at a higher level of consciousness. That stuff won't affect you anymore. Those failures won't affect you anymore. You understand, when you know you're having a meeting with the king and you find out that the beef you made for dinner just burnt, who cares? I can care less. I'm sitting right now with the king. I'm meeting with the king right now. When you know that you're standing mamish with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you're at a higher altitude, all those things below, they're a joke. Are you kidding me? It's a joke. But it's only going to be a joke if you can learn to stand in a higher altitude, at a higher position, in a higher place where you can rise above, where you can go to that level. Imagine you can't tie your shoes. And I have this problem all the time. My shoes just won't stay tied. I don't know what it is. They should invent like something like a shoe tie clipper or something. There must be out there somewhere. Someone look into that, right? There is, right? There's for sure, right? So the shoes don't stay tied. Now you try over and over, nothing. It's frustrating. It doesn't stay tied. But let's say right now you're sitting down and they've invited you to a closed cabinet meeting with the president. You're there, sitting there, and they want you to sit there and they want you to enjoy. You're at the White House. The fact that your shoelace won't stay tied, you could care less. This is opportunity of a lifetime. You can care less. It's the same idea. All those other things that bother us, that annoy us, that get to us, they fall away when you stand at a higher altitude. They go away when we think about life in that way. Sixth idea. Okay? Sixth idea. Sixth empowering idea of the day. People who are of weaker spirit, what I mean is the people that exhibit less leadership qualities are the ones that are always focusing on the things that they see. How does Avram become the great leader that he becomes? God says to him, Lech lecha me'artzecha, go from your land to a land where I will show you. Avram's whole journey begins to a place he's never seen. He just goes. He's never seen it. But you can't see it. Where's it on the map? I can show it to me. I got to see it. Where I'm going yet, I don't know where I'm going. I got to see what it looks like. He never sees it. Because Avram's whole life was about bringing the message to the world that the most important things in our lives are the things we can't see. The things we can't see. It's why he smashed his father's idols. Why did it bother him so much that his father Terach had idols? Why did that consume him? It consumed him because it meant a culture was being raised believing that everything is connected to that which you can see. You worship that which the eye can see. Avram said, no, that's the opposite of what God is about. You could see them, and since you could see them, that can't be God. That can't be God. I just love the Midrash which explains how Avram first found God. Avram looks out, and the Midrash says that he saw a bira dolekes. He saw a world on fire. And Omar, and he says, Mi bala bira. Who's in charge of this world? Who's in charge? Who's the captain here? And God says, it's me. I've been waiting for you to show up and help me with this world. It's an unbelievable idea that Avram was able to focus and make his life about things that no one else could see. Because that's what Judaism values. The things that are more substantive, that are more valuable, are the things that you can't touch. Look at Chayei Sarah. The greatest act and tribute of chesed that Avram did was find a burial plot for his wife Sarah. Why is that? That's common decency. I would assume that that would be expected of any spouse when the time comes that they take care of their spouse that way. Well, why is that so special? It's because Avram went out of his way to broker a deal on a value of which no one could understand and which nobody could see. Only he understood that in Hebron and in Marat HaMachpelah, in that cave, there was something there that transcended everything that people could see. It just seemed like a plot of land. He didn't have land near him, but land all over the place. There's no end of land at that time in the world. Why did he need this? Because Avram's life was about seeing that which you cannot see. Literally that which you cannot see. And this happens to Avram over and over and over again. You know, in his dream at the Bris Ben Abisarim, he's shown Egypt. What was it about Egypt that's so against everything we believe? You know what it is about Egypt that's against everything we believed? Egypt celebrates the visual. Pyramids, monuments, sphinxes, even mummifying people is taking people who should no longer be physical anymore and turning them into the physical, preserving the physical nature of that person and their values forever. They were buried with their riches. A lot of them don't have them anymore because people looted it. But they were buried with their riches because Egypt was about the world of the intangible turned into the tangible. It's why we love Shabbos. It's why Jews love Shabbos. The world operates through commerce and barter. What do I have? What do I own? But on Shabbos, you don't make things. You don't increase on Shabbos. You mainly spend the day with things you cannot see, but only with what you can feel. You know, there's a great line of Rav Simcha Bunim of Peshischa, the great Hasidic Rebbe who was the teacher of the Kotzker Rebbe. Right? So later in life, he went blind. And his students asked him to go see a doctor. Why don't you go see a doctor? You know what he said at the end of his life? He said, I could already see everything that I need to see. I could already see everything that I need to see. And that's the idea. The idea is that Judaism teaches us focus on the intangible. Our gifts to our children, the treats, if they're always physical, they're going to run out. How are you going to outdo the gift you did the week before? Our gifts to each other. It's called the hedonist cycle in English. You can't outdo the gift you did the year before. You did the vacation here, you did the thing there. There's no way to up the game. And at a certain point, you get to a point where it just breaks and it can't work anymore. But when you focus on the intangible, the values, the being present for someone, showing somebody love, that stuff can't be measured. You can't quantify that. There's no value on that. And therefore, those intangible gifts and allowing our children to appreciate that the intangible is so much more precious and valuable than the tangible, that means the world. That's a great lesson. Let's go to the next idea. Idea number 7. Idea number 7. When you daven, do you shuckle or do you stay straight? Do you shake or do you stay straight? Rav Moshe Feinstein famously said that he stayed straight during davening. Why? Because when he was a young scholar in Russia, he looked out the window and he saw how straight the Russian army stood in front of their commander. And he said to himself, if that's how they stand in front of their commander, how much more so we stand in front of God. He stood perfectly straight. The Mishnah Berurah, the Chafetz Chaim, says it's better to shake during your prayers. Why? Because the Torah says, Kol atzmosai tomarna, all my bones shall praise you, God. So that's a funny use of a source. How do our limbs praise God? What does that mean, our limbs praise God? So I'll share with you the following deep idea. I heard this, to be honest, lahavdil, from Deepak Chopra. But my yesod of this shir is that all these ideas that are very in now, that are very transformative now, are all ideas that have always been there. Deepak Chopra's idea is that your body was designed in the most sophisticated way, that all of creation, all of the magnificence of God and everything that He is capable of is all inside of you. Everything you need to know is inside of you. So watch this. And Deepak made a whole book on this and sold millions of copies. Rav Bachya ibn Pekuda, writing in the Chovas HaLevavos, says, it is our job to study the physical frame of the human being, how all the various body parts are connected and function together. Study man's temperaments, the faculties of his intellect, because once you understand the human, you understand God. It's unbelievable. That's exactly the yesod. You understand what HaKadosh Baruch Hu put in you, you could begin to understand HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You know, I'll give you an analogy. There's a father who needs to get something done, and his child keeps bothering him. So he says, please, please leave me alone, leave me alone. His son keeps bothering him. So he has a great idea. He has a newspaper, and the newspaper is a picture of a very intricate map. So the father rips it up into 100 pieces, and he gives it to the kid and says, here, solve the puzzle. Figures he bought himself a good 2-3 hours. Kid comes back to him in literally 5 minutes. Why? He realizes on the back of the picture of the world was a picture of a human being. So on the back of the picture of the map was a simple picture of a human being. And the child used that side in order to solve it. What's the message? The message of that illustration is fix the person, fix the self, then you could fix the world. Study what you're made of, and then you could understand what the world is made of as well. So that idea of the Chovas HaLevavos opens up a beautiful idea. The Rambam, Hilchos Yesodei HaTorah. How do you come to love and fear God? Think about God's creations. You are one of God's creations. Understand what you are made of. And through understanding what you are made of, you will understand and appreciate God's creation. I'll give you another teaching like this. Okay? Yeah, bring him in. What? I need a break from talking for a second. Give myself a headache. Come on in. Go ahead. Come on in. Come on in. Wow, welcome. The 8th grade girls are here. Come on in. Come on in. Let's bring them in. I'm going to be quiet for a minute while you sit so I can rest my voice.
How you doing, Rabbi?
Good, good. Oh, let me pass my drink here. Wait. Oh, thank you. Okay. This is the reason why we're doing this shir. This is the reason why we're doing the 19-hour shir. It's not so I could give myself a headache for 19 hours and keep talking and talking, but rather it's for the sake of talking about Torah, promoting Torah, what Torah means, and what you can do when you commit yourself to Torah. That's what this is about. We are talking about new ideas that could change your life, that have always been there in the Torah. The idea we're up to is if you understand how awesome and amazing your own body is, what God made with you. The Chovas HaLevavos says, study the body. Understand what you're made out of, and you see how gavaldic and how amazing HaKadosh Baruch Hu is. So I'll give you an example. If you look at the Mishkan, right? The Mishkan, the Torah explains the Mishkan in the following way. If you ever read the psukim that deal with it, it calls, for example, the bolts on the bottom of the Mishkan, it calls them the yados of the Mishkan. It describes a part of the Mishkan as the tzalaos of the Mishkan. Tzalaos literally means the rib cage. There's a piece called the raglayim, the legs of the Mishkan. Why does it keep using body parts to describe the Mishkan? Says Rabbeinu Bechaye, because the Mishkan was literally a recreation of a human being. It's supposed to be a recreation of the human being. What about a lulav, right? How do Chazal define the lulav? The lulav is the spine, the etrog is the heart, the hadassim, the eyes. What are the aravos? The mouth. What are we doing? Because Hashem made the human being as the perfect mashal. We were Hashem's prize creation. And if you appreciate what you represent, what the human being represents, you could appreciate HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Says the Maharal. Listen what the Maharal says. The Maharal said all the characteristics of a human being are there to remind us of Hashem. Walking upright reminds us that Hashem is upright. He's straight. The idea of having two eyes reminds us that Hashem sees the universe. The heels of our feet reminds us that Hashem is such a rock. He's so supportive. You can lean on Hashem. Every part of our body reminds us of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Everything reminds us of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Your body is, let's get a deeper level of how our body sings the praises of Hashem. You know that every cell in your body, when you're healthy, agrees to work for the entire body, for the whole. And if necessary, listen to this, if necessary, the cell will die in order to protect the rest of the organisms. And skin cells die every hour, thousands by the hour. Why? In order to replenish and keep your body healthy. It's unbelievable. Every cell is working to keep you strong, to keep you able. Every cell is working together. Communication. You have something called messenger molecules. Messenger molecules race all over your body to keep the DNA passing along beautifully from one area to the next, from moving from one flexibility and creativity. Cells have to keep adapting at every moment. Liver cells do 50 separate tasks at one shot. The creativity and the flexibility of your body is unbelievable. Efficiency. Cells are able to function with even the smallest usage of energy. A cell stores only 3 seconds of food and oxygen inside its cell wall. It's efficient. It's efficient. Bonding. Because of their common genetic inheritance, cells know that they're the same, and they're able to combine and join together and regenerate muscle tissue. It's the most amazing thing. In a lab right now, muscle cells can be used to create a heart cell. We're so close to cloning human beings. It's just a matter of time. You know this. It's just a matter of time before we can clone mamish human beings, and that's because cells understand each other. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu put a piece of his nitzchius. What does nitzchius mean? Eternal. He put a little bit of his eternality in us. How? Listen to what cells do. It's unbelievable what HaKadosh Baruch Hu did in us. Cells reproduce. And they reproduce, and the next generation of cells have all the knowledge, the experience, and the talents of the previous generation of the cells before. And it passes it on, passes it on, passes it on. And your body always knows what it needs to do. Our body is telling us everything we need. Now with that in mind, we understand what the Chafetz Chaim said. What I said before, the Chafetz Chaim thought that you should move when you daven Shemona Esrei. Why? Because your whole body praises Hashem. How does your whole body praise Hashem? Because when you see that every part of your body is magnificent, it's a living, breathing miracle, then you could appreciate the power of what it's able to do and how HaKadosh Baruch Hu has made you the way He has made you. So that is the 7th idea that we've learned here. I got 3 minutes left in this shir. 3 minutes left. And the last idea, I'm up to the last idea I wanted to share. This is the 8th idea. I call it watching the problem. What does that mean? Whenever we have negative thoughts, whenever we get angry or we get upset or we feel like a failure, we do bad on a test, or everybody else around us seem to have done well, we begin to beat ourselves up. We tell ourselves, I'm not good at this, I'm not good at that. So I saw this book by Michael Singer, The Untethered Soul. Again, my point in this share, I said at the beginning, is to show you that all these modern ideas of how to think, how to feel, they've always been there in our Masorah. They were there long before these books were written. He says, treat that thought not as you. You are not your thoughts. Right? Again, the way he says it is, there is nothing more important to true growth than realizing you are not the voice of the mind. You're the one who's hearing it. If you don't understand this, you will try to figure out which of the many things the voice says is really you. People go through so many changes trying to find myself. They want to discover which voice is the real voice. The answer is none of them. All these voices you keep hearing in your head, I'm no good at that, I'm terrible at this. They're not you. Where does that show up in our tradition? Says Rav Chaim Volozhin, the great Rav Chaim Volozhin, 300 years ago. Rav Chaim Volozhin said, how did the snake get Adam and Eve to eat from the tree? You know how he got them to eat from the tree? He told them, I am the voice in your head. That voice that you hear telling you that you're not worth it, that your God doesn't need you, you're a waste of space, the snake made you believe you were the voice you were hearing. That's it. That's a Gavaldic idea. Rav Dessler writes, right? Before eating the fruit, you understood that anything negative is not you. God made you perfect. After you ate, you began to tell yourself, that's me. That's what changed. That's what changed. The Gemara in Brachos tells us, La'olam yargiz adam es yetzer hara. A person should try to use his yetzer hara. Right? It says, B'chol moadecha. You're supposed to use, says the Gemara, use your yetzer hara even to serve you. What does that mean? If someone has they're stubborn. They're just a stubborn person. They're a stubborn person. So you could look at yourself and say, I'm just such a terrible person, I'm so stubborn. Says the Gemara, no, use it. Use your stubbornness, because it's not you. It's just a voice you hear. Take that stubbornness and use it for a good thing. Use it for a good cause. I'm not going to give up making meals for people for Shabbos. I know the last person told me at Tomchei Shabbos, I don't need your gift. I don't need your tzedakah. I don't need your chesed. I know somebody in the community who gives himself over for chesed, and sometimes that chesed turns around and would even spit back in the person's face, not appreciating what they did for him, not appreciating what they've done. Does that person give up in chesed? No, because you say it's not about me. It's about the bigger picture. It's about doing good and changing Klal Yisrael and using that akshanas, sometimes that stubbornness, using it for good and changing the world. So you have to realize that all these ideas that are out there, so many beautiful ideas out in the world, these universal truths have always been there in our tradition. And the avoda is learning how to bring them into our lives and using them for good. I think